Hi, this is Vanessa Baker with McHenry County Voter. Today we're speaking with Patrick Kenneally. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
Kenneally, who's running for McHenry County State's Attorney. Paula, Dorian Gray, and Bob Gray, who've been my clients for years, are honorary chair people.
Mr. and Mrs. Crystal Lake.
Yeah. And are they still honorary chair people
They are.
for your campaign?
They are. Yes, they are.
That's kind of cool. It's a small world.
Mm-hmm.
And Patrick was endorsed for this position in the primary by the Chicago Tribune.
Thank you.
As a domestic violence prosecutor, Patrick changed the way that domestic violence cases are prosecuted by trying and winning cases despite fearful victims refusing to appear in court with evidence-based prosecution cases.
Mm-hmm.
For his efforts, Patrick earned Turning Point's Peace and Justice Award. As a special prosecutor, Patrick is responsible for prosecuting the most dangerous and violent offenders, including murderers, rapists, armed robbers, child molesters, and drunk drivers. Thank you for joining us, Patrick, and thank you for serving our community.
My pleasure, and thank you very much for having me. This is the nicest setting I've had, I think, so far for an interview.
Great. So you appreciate the awesome side porch.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Very
good.
much.
You've been in the state's attorney office for the past 9 years.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about that. What happens in the state's attorney's office?
Well, the state's attorney's office is primarily responsible for two things. First of all, the state's attorney's office is responsible for prosecuting everybody that's charged with a crime, as well as representing the county as its attorney. So on civil and municipal matters, the state's attorney's office provides legal advice to county board members and other county government agencies. I started at the state's attorney's office in 2007. I'm not from McHenry originally, so I had a job downtown with another government agency. I originally wanted to be a public defender, if you believe that. And they cut the budget. So I started looking around and I found McHenry County and I applied for the job and I ended up getting it. So I didn't know, I'd never been to McHenry County when I came out here. My initial plan was sort of to stay for 2 years. There's a lot of people that look at the state's attorney's office sort of as a training ground for lawyers. You sort of learn to think on your feet. You learn how to stand up and present an argument in court. You do that for a few years and then you go off to a more lucrative sort of civil career, whatever the case may be. So that was my initial plan coming in here. But I came out here and I fell in love not only with McHenry County, but I fell in love with the job. So fundamentally what the state's attorney's office is all about is doing justice. And it's not necessarily, it's not as though you have a client that you need to zealously represent, whether or not you agree with their views or not. I get up every day and it's my job to do the right thing on behalf of everybody involved in the criminal justice process, not only the victim, but also the person who's accused of a crime. But I do have a special attachment, I think, to my work on behalf of victims. I mean, these are people that are going along with their lives and bang out of the blue, they have to suffer some kind of horrible violation, either violence, sexual violation, things of that nature, or even it happens to their family member, which a lot of times is even worse. And working with them to sort of find what their vision of justice is one of the most meaningful parts of the job.
Wow, great. So do you coordinate as well with the local police department? Or?
We work hand in hand with the police. So the police are usually responsible for investigating the crime, and we take what the police have done and we present the evidence that they collect in court. So your relationships with law enforcement is exceedingly important. Every case that I try, I'm working as a partner with law enforcement to put that case together and to try to get justice.
Thank you very much. So what led you to decide to run for state's attorney, which is an elected position,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I'm a reluctant politician. I had never planned in my life sort of to pursue a political path, but Lou Bianchi, who's the current state's attorney and a close friend of mine as well as a mentor, was going to be retiring, and they asked me if I'd be willing to run, and so it was an honor. And the reason that I ran is because Lou has done so, and the office over the last 12 years has done so much for this community. We've sort of changed the way, like you were saying, with domestic violence cases.
Yes.
Prior to Lou's arrival in 2004, 2/3 of the domestic violence cases were just being dismissed because victims who understandably were very cautious to prosecute people that they were in a relationship with, or who they loved, or who they were still scared of, or who they sort of relied on financially. So 2/3 of those cases were just dismissed outright. Well, that's not justice. That's not an adequate response to what had been happened. So we sort of changed the way that domestic violence cases were prosecuted, in that we would still go forward even without the consent of the victim. And we did that with a lot of other types of crimes. We started to actually try cases as opposed to plead everything out. And it's important to try cases because you fundamentally, you're trying to respond to crime in a way that creates a change in the person. And if you're just sort of pleading things out to people, to terms that are desirable to defense attorneys and defendants, you're sort of not creating that change. Lou started drug court. Lou started domestic violence court. We started the bad check program, which allows businesses to get restitution for bad checks. We started mental health court. And I think there has been a lot of there's been some not just green shoots, but we've bore a lot of fruit from this, and the fact that violent crime starting in 2004 in McHenry has been decreased by almost half.
Wow.
Domestic violence cases have been decreased by 20%. DUIs that are charged by the sheriff have been decreased 20% as well. And you can't necessarily explain that as just sort of national trends in crime statistics, because most crime in other areas of the country starting in 2000 actually began to go up. So I think that our firm resolve to hold everybody accountable has done a lot in this county to reduce the incidence of crime.
Wow, that's terrific. Thanks for sharing that.
No problem.
Yeah, that's wonderful for us. What do you wish voters knew about you?
I think that I don't know that I necessarily want people to know. I don't. There's nothing specific I want them to know about me. But I guess as a prosecutor, I'd like them to know that we're not about putting people in jail. And we never have been. There's sort of this myth out there that the reason that we're having financial trouble as a state, in part, is because that the prosecutors and police are locking up these nonviolent drug offenders. That doesn't happen. I want to help people that have been charged with crimes, in addition to helping the victim. I want to make sure that they are referred to the resources that they need, while also holding them accountable. And part of holding people accountable, in my opinion, is helping them. Because and especially for a prosecutor, I don't take any joy in sending somebody to prison. I don't take any joy in sending somebody to jail. I don't take any joy in fining people. Most of the people, there are monsters that I have come across in this profession that I have taken joy in sending to prison. But most of the people that I prosecute, that I see in criminal courtrooms, screwed up. They're the type of people that I've seen throughout my life. They're the type of people that I know. And so every time that you pursue a criminal case and there are consequences for it, while I'm relieved on behalf of the victim, while I think it's the right thing, the whole enterprise has this element of sadness to it.
You've spoken about the county's growing heroin and opioid epidemic. Opioid.
Right.
Thank you. That's a hard word. Let's talk about that. So, is there still an epidemic? Are we still worried about that, or?
We are. Heroin and opioid deaths in this county have been increasing. A big part of that is that there are, nationally, we've seen an increase in the amount of heroin that's coming into the country. In fact, over the last 10 years, heroin production in South America that's being transferred through Mexico is up about 700%.
Wow.
What that means is that there's a lot more heroin in this country, and so it's a lot cheaper, and people have access to it. In addition, since 1990, the amount of opioid-based pain medications, hydrocodone, oxycodone, those types of drugs have the amount of that doctors are prescribing those drugs has gone up by a factor of 3. So there's a specific pathway to heroin that is very common, which is you get injured, you hurt your knee, you have knee surgery, you hurt your ankle, you get prescribed an opioid-based pain reliever, that prescription dries up, but now you're addicted to it, and so you move on to heroin because it's a lot cheaper and more accessible. Heroin is also affecting young people in this community. So there's two types of opioid-based deaths that we see in McHenry County that are on the rise. One is heroin, especially among young people between the ages of 20 to 40. But then there's another whole class, which is, and that a lot of people don't talk about or even know about, which is elderly people. So people over the age of 50 very often are overdosing on the medication that they're prescribed, either because they have age-related cognitive decline and they forget that they've taken their medication, or they get disoriented because of the medication and they take too much of the medication and they overdose. So we have started, through the McHenry County Substance Abuse Coalition, a initiative that's made up of the sheriff, the coroner, the McHenry County Substance Abuse Coalition, who else am I missing? Rosecrans, and court services. And the whole point of this is to begin to take on this epidemic, because, as I said before, not only are deaths increasing, but also the amount of crime, the amount of heroin possession cases are also going up in this county.
Wow.
So one of the things we want to make sure that we do is get Narcan, which is the antidote to heroin overdose, in the hands of every police officer in this county. We want to do it for free. We think that we're going to be able to accomplish that working with Centegra actually by August.
Wow.
So that started after I won the primary election. We started this initiative, and this is the first thing that we're doing. In addition to that, another interesting thing that we're pursuing, that I'm hoping we're going to get off the ground by the end of the year, is a Way Out. Now, a Way Out is a program that is currently being run in Lake County, whereby if you're an addict, okay, or if you're somebody that's struggling with any type of substance abuse, you can present yourself at a police department, any police department in the county. You can drop off whatever drugs that you have, and instead of being arrested, the police will take you to get help, whether it's inpatient or outpatient. I think that's a wonderful program. I think fundamentally that's how we're going to solve this public health crisis that has sort of begun to balloon in this county, as well as other counties in and around the city of Chicago. If you look, and then in addition to that, we're also going to continue our commitment to drug court. Now, what drug court allows is for people who are arrested, and their fundamental issue is not necessarily the crime that they're arrested for, but the fact that they're addicted to some kind of drug. They go into a highly structured, intensive program where they're tested weekly. They have weekly consequences if they test positive for any kind of substance, and through that program, people essentially take their lives back. So I was at a drug court graduation, and it's a 4-phase program. And prior to drug court, the graduates in the class, there were 10 of them, and between them, collectively, they had been arrested over 150 times.
Wow.
All right?
Yeah.
So since drug court, the recidivism rate is something like less than 10%. So if you truly want to begin addressing crime, you need to begin addressing the underlying problems, and in very many cases, the underlying problem is drugs, and that's why drug court is such a, just a remarkable program that saves people body and soul.
Wow, thank you. That's really positive news for us. And I'll be sure to find links to these different...
Sure, I can get those to you.
Absolutely, we'll include them for people to read more. You've spoken about cracking down on repeat DUI offenders as well. How does that happen? Is it the same type of process that you've described, or?
Sure. So many people think when somebody's arrested for DUI that they're fall down drunk, they fall out of the car and they're vomiting, or they're can't walk. Everybody sort of has this vision of the drunk driver as somebody who is extremely intoxicated. Truth is that's not always true. Especially when you're talking about repeat DUI offenders who have developed a tolerance to alcohol and have learned to function at various BACs that are above 0.08. In addition to that, what a lot of people don't know about DUI is that fundamentally the evidence of DUI is the person who is the suspect. And they can do a number of things to obstruct an investigation. For example, Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution says that you don't have to talk to a police officer. One of the primary ways that you can detect whether or not a person's under the influence of alcohol is by the manner and the nature of their speech. So if they're unwilling to talk to a police officer does not have that piece of evidence that they would need to prosecute them. One of the best ways that we have to prosecute a DUI offender is a breathalyzer test. But you cannot be forced to take a breathalyzer test, not in the state of Illinois. So very often if you've been arrested before for DUI and you've come in contact with DUI defense attorneys, their first piece of advice to you is don't say anything and don't take a breathalyzer test. So a lot of times we don't have the evidence that's necessary in order to prosecute repeat offenders, especially if they're system sophisticated and know not to cooperate with the police. So one of the things that I've been working on and that I'm excited to say we're actually moving forward with the court is electronic warrants, which would allow a judge to issue a warrant over a computer software program, which would allow police to get warrants a lot quicker, especially in the middle of the night when a lot of these DUI cases are occurring. So instead of having to take the suspect to the police station, secure him, type up a warrant, drive out to the judge's house, get the judge to sign it, and then drive back to the police station, take the suspect to the hospital, and have the hospital draw his blood, which can take 2-3 hours, and very often the blood alcohol content in the suspect's blood has dissipated below 0.08. This would allow the police, wherever they are, to just get on the horn with a judge and after they type up a warrant and get a warrant signed so that it will expedite the process of getting that person's blood. I think that that's something that is extremely important. And what we do know about people who commit DUIs is that the recidivism rate is extremely high, and people are not very likely to get caught for DUI. In fact, studies show that that you can drive up to, on average, 2,000 times before you get caught even once. So we got to make sure that when we do get those people, and we do finally, and we are finally able to make a case against somebody who's driving under the influence of alcohol, that we make sure that it sticks so that this type of behavior doesn't continue.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, that's really exciting. It's good for technology. Good for us. So on your website, and we're going to include a link, it mentions some high-profile cases that you've done. Would you like to talk about one of them?
Sure. I'll talk about the most recent case. That was last year. It was a double murder. And it was the double murder of Nick and Gloria Romano that took place in Crystal Lake. And it took place in 2006. So in 2012, I went to the sheriff's department, and we, along with investigators with the sheriff's department, we literally pulled this box off of a shelf. It was a cold case. And we began to work it up over the course of 2 years. And it was a very complicated circumstantial case, and it involved two brothers. One of the brothers was the good brother who loved his father. In fact, his license plate said Dad BFF, for best friends forever, I guess. And the other son was sort of a wayward son who went broke and was looking to get his father's inheritance. So we take this file down, and as I said, it was really complicated, a lot of charts, a lot of timelines, and I remember I had all kinds of diagrams up all over my office, and people would come in and make fun of me like I was from the character A Beautiful Mind. Like I had lost my mind, and this is all I would think about, this is all I would do. But I was really obsessed with this case, and with the help of the McHenry County Sheriff's Office, as well as some assistants, we put the whole thing together, and last fall, we tried Michael Romano for double murder, and he was convicted. Now, Nick Romano had been living for, over 9 years, thinking his brother was responsible for this, but not knowing. And you could almost see a 200-pound weight, a tension in his eyes, just sort of float away from him upon the finding of guilty, because this had been something that had haunted him for many, many years. And then when I'm talking about the job, those are the type of moments that make the entire struggle for justice worth it.
Absolutely. Wow. That's really incredible. What other issues, and we've talked about a lot so far, but is there any other issues you'd like to highlight that you think are most important to McHenry County? That you'd like to talk about?
Sure. One of the things that I also this is something that Lou was very conscious of, and that I want to remain very conscious of, which is businesses in McHenry County. Businesses is what make this community thrive. And very often people say, oh, you know, he stole whatever, a pack of gum from Walmart, or they stole light bulbs from the hardware store. What's the big deal? Slap them on the wrist. But what I think people need to understand, especially about businesses, is every dollar that's taken from a business, and it's a significant expense, retail theft and those types of crimes and extortion, and people who sort of doctor the books, who are responsible for accounting, things of that nature. That's a significant part of any business's bottom line. And all of that money is one less dollar that can be used to pay somebody for their work. You know, it's one less dollar that can be put into a tax revenue. It's one less dollar that that business can use and donate to charity. So making sure that these types of crimes that affect even big businesses are not viewed as no big deal, and that fundamentally we prosecute those cases the same way that we prosecute any other case, and we ensure that restitution is made. That is one of the issues that I want to make sure that businesses, especially in the McHenry County community, know that that's something that I'm committed to.
I think that's terrific. And as a chamber member, which I know you're a chamber member, I'm sure chamber members are very happy to hear that. So thank you very much. Do you support term limits? That's something that has been coming up particularly lately as far as a concern.
I do, but probably not in the manner that it's been proposed. So I spent an early part of my career working for an environmental nonprofit agency. And we did some lobbying in Michigan. And in Michigan, they have term limits. And one of the things that I found, and they had very short term limits, and one of the things that I found is that we were constantly having to re-educate lawmakers on a whole host of extremely complicated issues. And what that did was that made them susceptible to lobbyists who would also donate to their campaigns. So big moneyed lobbyists, they would rely upon them for their expertise as opposed to developing it themselves. But then you look at Illinois, and you have certain elements in Springfield that have accumulated over the years, year after year, amassed an enormous amount of power and influence by virtue of the fact that they've been doing it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So that's not right either. So I think that there's a tension there, and I think that the balance probably lies somewhere in the middle. Whereas, yes, I support term limits, but I don't necessarily support significantly, or I don't necessarily support term limits that would only allow for, let's say, somebody in the house, let's say somebody in the state house, only 2 terms, 4 years, 6 years, 8 years. I think that in order to, I really think that we want mature and seasoned lawmakers that have a good grasp of the issues making the decisions, and that sometimes comes with a little bit of time in office.
Thank you. That's very good points. If you were elected, we've talked about some projects. Are one of these projects, as you mentioned, the first things you're looking to work on? I mean, obviously you're just kind of continue to work that you've already started.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I wanted to do after the primary campaign was get to work, because nothing's promised to you in politics, you know. And now that I've run for state's attorney, I've been promoted to first assistant in the office, which means that I'm second in command. There's a number of things that I wanted to dive right into. So the opioid work is one of them. The electronic warrant work is something else. And the third thing that I wanted to do that I had sort of touched on, but I didn't talk about specifically, was making sure that drug court was available to misdemeanor offenders who are high risk, high needs in terms of their level of addiction. Right now, drug court is only available to felony offenders, but as we talked about, many people who are addicted to substances are committing misdemeanors in order to subsidize their habit, and instead of having to wait to address their issue until they get to felony court, I'd like to pursue some type of program that would allow us to invite drug addicted offenders who have committed misdemeanor offenses into into drug court.
Thank you. Oh, that's great. Do you have any local non-for-profits that you'd like to highlight?
I do. I have 2. The first is Heroes for Haley. So Heather Wierenski used to work at the McHenry County State's Attorney's Office, and she is a joy. I mean, there's a light coming from Heather. I mean, she's I wish she still worked at the State's Attorney's Office, but she's off and on to bigger and better things, which I'm happy for. but her cousin tragically died of cancer. And so they started a nonprofit group called Hero for Haley's that provides support as well as money to local cancer patients whose family and them are currently struggling. So that's one, and I just ran in a 5K. There's a picture of me all sweaty, so I mean I wouldn't recommend going to look that up on the website, but it's there. And the second one is Big Brothers Big Sisters. I had a very good friend in college who died, and his name was John. And John played lacrosse, and I played lacrosse. So the lacrosse team began a John's Brothers, which was associated with Big Brothers Big Sisters out east where I went to school. And I saw firsthand what a remarkable program that is, and how you're really having a lasting impact and influence on kids' lives who actually really need it. Big Brothers Big Sisters of McHenry is here. They're doing terrific work all around the county, and so I would encourage anybody who's interested in supporting them, I would encourage them to do so.
Thank you very much. And we can put links to them in the article too. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. When you're not campaigning, what do you like to do on the weekend?
I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, so it's basically childcare. that's when I'm not campaigning, I'm taking care of 2 little wild men.
2 little wild men.
Yeah.
Are you watching Elmo, or what's
The-
popular
the-
with the 1 and
The
3-year-old?
older boy, Patrick, he likes Octonauts, and he likes Cat in the Hat. And the little guy John is sort of just coming around to understanding that the television has some pretty cool stuff on it. So, you know, we're close to he's crawling now, which I'm happy about, and he's close to walking. But you can see his person. Where right around a year, you can really see their personalities begin to come to the fore. So.
That's so cute.
Yeah.
We'll enjoy. Also, I'd like to mention that you have an upcoming fundraiser on August 18th at Boulder Ridge Country Club,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to put a link to your Facebook page for more information. Is that
Alright.
the best place for it? or-
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And also, I do ask people who come to the Awesome Side Porch for McHenry County Voter if they'd like to tell us a joke.
Oh man.
But I'm totally putting you on the spot.
I'm blank. Well, I'll tell you the best joke that somebody told me today that's at my expense.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of my coworkers walked into my office and he said, "That's a very nice tie if you're competing in a Tetris tournament."
Is it that timing?
So,
That's good.
so that's it. That's
a
the
good
best I can do.
Oh, that's good.
All right.
Thank you so much, Patrick Kenneally, for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and speak to us again. I'm Vanessa Baker with McHenry County Voter, a nonpartisan resource dedicated to our neighbors in McHenry County and the good people that serve them.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.